When you think about philosophy, it's often uh, dusty books, right?
Yeah.
Sitting around deep thoughts in quiet rooms.
Right. Images of academics, maybe thinkers isolated from the world.
Exactly. But for some of the most, well, practical ancient thinkers, wisdom wasn't really found sitting still at all.
No, it was found while moving, quite literally.
Found while moving. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we try to turn these ancient ideas into, well, useful strategies for today.
That's always the aim.
And today, we're sort of lacing up our imaginary sandals, I guess.
Metaphorically speaking, yes. Or maybe just comfortable walking shoes.
Right, and exploring this really simple but potentially profound act of walking. The whole philosophy behind movement.
That's right. Because, the simple act of walking or even just engaging in some kind of mild physical activity, it
Yes.
wasn't just physical maintenance for thinkers like the Stoics.
Not just keeping fit.
No, not at all. It was actually a central, really practical tool for achieving mental fitness, you could say.
Mental fitness, I like that.
It wasn't just a way to travel from A to B. It was seen as a necessary part of contemplation, of the philosophical practice itself.
Okay, so our mission in this deep dive then is to kind of reclaim some of that ancient wisdom.
Exactly. We're going to look at Stoic sources, and some related ones too, to understand how they really managed to integrate physical movement with deep mental work.
How they turn something so everyday, something we often rush through or do distractively now,
Right, like commuting or just pacing around.
into this powerful, focused practice for clarity, for wisdom.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a good range of guides for this, primarily the big Roman Stoics people often hear about. Seneca.
The advisor, the playwright,
Yeah,
wealthy guy.
very much so. Then there's Epictetus, who started life as a slave, incredibly different background, became this hugely revered teacher.
Amazing story.
And Marcus Aurelius, the emperor,
Yeah.
writing his meditations probably while on military campaigns.
Wow. So you couldn't get much more different in terms of life circumstances.
Exactly. Slave, emperor, courtier. Yet they all converged on these core principles for living well. And we'll also lean on commentators like Musonius Rufus.
Epictetus' teacher.
That's the one.
Yeah.
He was apparently very meticulous about the practical side of things, ethics, psychology, but also the physical requirements for a good life.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The goal here is, how do we turn our own daily steps, whether it's, walking the dog or just a walk around the block,
Or even maybe pacing while thinking.
into a kind of dedicated school for the soul? That sounds ambitious.
It does, but that's essentially what they were aiming for.
Yeah.
And it starts immediately with a really vital distinction they made.
Okay.
Defining the right kind of physical movement. This is key. The Stoics weren't just saying, go exercise. They weren't advocates for, say, excessive, punishing physical exertion.
Ah, interesting.
Their focus was always on moderation, precisely because their primary concern was mental growth, not just building muscle.
That immediately kind of challenges our modern mindset, doesn't it?
Right.
We often think high intensity is the best, harder is better.
Absolutely. No pain, no gain, that sort of thing. But the sources, like Musonius Rufus, suggest that for philosophical clarity, that kind of intensity is actually counterproductive.
Counterproductive. How so?
Well, Musonius Rufus was really clear about this. He argued that tasks requiring excessive physical exertion are basically unsuitable for a philosopher, for someone trying to think deeply.
Why? What's the reasoning?
Because that level of physical strain, it forces the soul or, the mind, our attention, to focus entirely on the body.
Ah, I see.
If you're gasping for air, if your muscles are screaming, if you're concentrating purely on just getting through the next step or the next lift.
Yeah, you're not exactly pondering the nature of virtue.
Precisely. Your capacity for deep, sustained intellectual work just evaporates. Your rational faculty is tied up managing the physical crisis.
So if your body's in that state of high alert or exhaustion, your mind is just dealing with the immediate physical input. No bandwidth left for abstract thought.
Exactly that. The soul, as they'd put it, can't achieve wisdom if it's constantly tethered to a body that's perceived to be in crisis or under extreme duress.
Okay.
So the critical distinction he makes is for activities that don't require that excessive exertion.
Moderate activities.
Moderate, sustained activities. Musonius Rufus argued these provide, and this is a great phrase, abundant leisure for the soul to do deep thinking.
Abundant leisure for the soul.
Yeah. To reflect on education, on life, ultimately leading towards wisdom. It's this moderate, steady effort that creates the right environment for the mind.
That idea of abundant leisure is fascinating, especially thinking about the Roman context. It almost sounds like the physical activity creates the condition for what the Greeks called skhole.
That's a perfect way to put it. Skhole that idea of leisure, but not just idleness, rather time dedicated to intellectual pursuits.
Disciplined leisure.
Disciplined leisure, exactly. It wasn't just about relaxing, it was about having the mental space to learn and reflect. And the right kind of physical work could facilitate that.
So what kinds of work did they approve of?
Well, Musonius Rufus explicitly approved of things compatible with freedom and suitable for a good contemplative person.
Yeah.
He pointed to certain kinds of agricultural work.
Farming, really?
Yes, things like planting, maybe working with vines, sowing, harvesting, tasks that are physical, necessary, repetitive.
But maybe don't require your absolute full mental focus once you know how to do them.
That's the key. Once mastered, they become somewhat rhythmic, almost automatic, freeing up the mind. He also mentioned the shepherd's life.
Right, that classic image of the thoughtful shepherd.
Combining philosophy with farming or shepherding was highly approved. It grounds you in physical reality, you're participating in the world, but your mind has the freedom to roam, to contemplate.
I love that. The philosopher isn't locked away in an ivory tower or library. They're out there doing something useful, but their mind is engaged in this other higher work.
It really confirms that for these thinkers, the physical activity wasn't just a preamble or an afterthought to the real work of philosophy.
It was integrated.
Deeply integrated. It was the chosen, controlled environment during which the mind could operate at its best. The rhythm of walking, the steady pace of the plow, it frees the rational mind from petty distractions, you see?
Yeah, it filters out the noise.
And provides that sustained time for the soul or the mind to become wiser. And this deliberate choice, this control over the environment, that's what makes it effective. It sets the stage perfectly for the core Stoic mental practice.
Which means we need to shift focus now. We've set the physical scene, moderate activity, creating mental space.
Yeah.
So what do we actually do with our minds while we're walking or engaged in this kind of work?
Now we get to the heart of it. The core task is to train the mind relentlessly to focus only on what it truly controls.
Okay.
And this brings us straight to a foundational concept, especially in Epictetus's philosophy. It's the idea of prohairesis,
Prohairesis, volition, or choice?
faculty of choice. Usually translated as volition, moral purpose, or the faculty of choice, yes. It represents the essential self.
Before we dive deep into prohairesis, maybe let's just briefly touch again on those three main figures, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, because their different lives really highlight why this internal focus was so vital for them.
That's a great point. You have Seneca advising Emperor Nero, incredibly wealthy, navigating treacherous politics.
High stakes, lots of external pressures.
Absolutely. Then Epictetus, starting as a slave. I mean, the ultimate lack of external control over his own body and circumstances.
Right.
And then Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, arguably the most powerful man in the world, yet writing constantly about the limits of his power and the need for inner stability amidst chaos.
So vastly different external situations. One a slave, one an emperor, one a courtier navigating power.
Couldn't be more different on the outside. But their shared philosophy, this commitment to living well, was anchored in the same single, unwavering principle, knowing what is actually yours to control and what isn't.
Which brings us back to prohairesis. Let's define that properly. What did Epictetus mean by volition, this essential self?
Okay, so prohairesis is essentially your inner command center. It's your rational mind, your character, your consciousness. It includes your goals, your desires, but crucially, your judgments.
Judgments, that seems key.
It's absolutely central. Epictetus was incredibly insistent on this. This internal domain of judgment and choice is the only place where true freedom resides, because only these things are fully, truly up to us.
So he had quite a dualistic view. Mind over matter, almost.
In a practical sense, yes. He presents humans as rational minds housed in bodies. And these bodies, along with everything, external possessions, reputation, health, relationships, status, are fundamentally vulnerable. They are subject to forces beyond our complete control.
They're external.
They're externals, exactly. And Epictetus warned very strongly that our freedom, our peace of mind, is completely jeopardized. It just vanishes the moment we mistakenly identify ourselves with these external things.
So if I think I am my job title, or my happiness depends on this relationship, or my worth is tied to my bank balance,
then you've made a fundamental error, according to Epictetus. You've attached your sense of self, your well-being, to things that are inherently unstable and outside your direct command.
And he called that a recipe for misery.
A certain recipe for disappointment, anxiety, and unhappiness were his words, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
If you tie your well-being to external conditions, whether it's getting that promotion, keeping that specific house, or even just having good weather for your walk, you are essentially handing over control of your happiness to things you don't control, to fate, to other people, to chance. You're guaranteeing frustration.
So he insisted that the only things that really matter for our inner well-being, our eudaimonia, are our judgments. But how does that connect back to the walk? If the walking itself, the physical movement, is external, why bother?
That's the crucial application point. This is where the walk becomes the training ground. When you're walking, the path itself, the weather, maybe a pebble in your shoe, the physical act of moving your legs, those are external factors. They are, in Epictetus's terms, not up to you.
Right, you can't control if it starts raining.
Exactly. But the attention you bring to the walk, the judgments you form about the rain, oh, this is terrible, or the rough path, this is ruining my walk, or any discomfort, that is purely internal. That is up to you.
I see.
The philosophical walk becomes this moving laboratory for applying the dichotomy of control in real time. You get to catch your faulty judgments as they arise in response to these minor external indifference.
Here's where it gets really interesting then. It's like you stop focusing so much on the destination, the where you're going, and start focusing intently on the how you're reacting internally to this simple experience of moving through the world, whatever it throws at you.
Precisely. That shift in framework transforms the walk. It's no longer just physical exercise. It becomes a continuous mental examination, a discipline.
It shifts the goal from, say, walking faster or further to walking better, more wisely.
Better in terms of character, yes. The efficacy of your inner self. And this sustained mental vigilance practiced during the walk leads us directly to the core content of the training. What are you actually training your mind to do?
Which is?
Mastering your mental impressions, rigorously examining them before you assent to them.
Okay, this is the famous Stoic psychological model, right? The idea that it's not events, but our opinions about events that cause distress.
That's absolutely central, the power of judgment. What makes us miserable isn't the thing itself, death, illness, losing a job, someone insulting you. Objectively, these are just events in the world.
Neutral fact.
Pretty much. What causes the suffering is our judgment about the event, the value we impose on it, especially its perceived negative bearing on ourselves.
So death itself isn't terrible, but the judgment, losing this person is terrible for me, is what causes the grief.
That's the Stoic analysis, yes. Stripped of our commentary, death is natural, a ship sinking is just physics and economics. It's our added layer, this is awful, this shouldn't happen, why me, that creates the emotional turmoil.
So the wisdom they're trying to cultivate, maybe during this walk, is the ability to see things objectively first, before slapping on those value judgments.
Exactly. Grasp the external thing as it is as objectively indifferent in the grand scheme of things before you let your mind run wild with interpretations about how good or bad it is for you.
Do they give practical examples of how to do this?
Oh, yes, constantly. Both Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius are full of them. Epictetus says, if your pot breaks, remind yourself it was just a pot. If you kiss your child, remember they are mortal. When a ship is lost at sea, train yourself to say only the ship is lost.
Not, oh no, my cargo, my investment, this is a disaster.
Precisely. Resist adding that second layer. Marcus Aurelius advises something similar. If someone drinks too much wine, observe only that fact he drank a lot of wine. Don't immediately leap to the judgment he did something terrible or he's a bad person.
Stick to the facts. Like a reporter.
An unbiased internal reporter. By rigorously sticking to the observable reality, you stripped the event of its power to provoke anxiety, anger, or despair. You cut off the irrational emotional response at the root.
That sounds incredibly difficult. It requires constant vigilance.
It requires immense practice and discipline, which is exactly why the dedicated time of a walk is so valuable. It provides the space for that practice. And this discipline, this objectivity, is absolutely crucial for managing emotions.
Right. Let's talk about emotions, because there's a common misconception, isn't there, that Stoics aim to be emotionless robots.
That's a very persistent misunderstanding. They were not aiming to eliminate all human feeling or become unfeeling blocks of stone. That wasn't the goal at all.
So what was the goal regarding emotions?
Their goal was to minimize, ideally eliminate, The negative, irrational, and excessive emotional responses, what they call the pathy, often translated as passions.
Passions. Like what?
Think of intense, violent emotional storms, crippling grief, consuming anger or rage, paralyzing anxiety, obsessive desire. These arise, in their view, directly from those faulty inner judgments we just talked about.
So bad judgments lead to bad emotions.
Essentially, yes. Irrational judgments lead to irrational, unhealthy emotions. But crucially, they made a very important psychological distinction here.
Okay. What was that?
They distinguished between these full-blown passions, pathy, and something else they called first movements, or propathia.
Propathia. First movements.
Yes. Seneca is particularly good at explaining this. Propathia are the natural, physiological, almost involuntary responses of the body that happen before the mind has fully processed and judged the situation.
Jumping at a loud noise.
Exactly. Or flinching if something flies near your face. Or maybe feeling your heart race, or getting a lump in your throat when you hear sudden bad news. These are physical reactions.
Instinctive. Precognitive almost.
Pretty much. They happen before conscious assent. Seneca points out that someone might momentarily turn pale or tremble when facing danger. That's the propathia. It's the body's initial shock response.
But that's not the actual emotion of fear yet.
Not the full-blown pathos of fear, no. For that first movement to become a destructive emotion, like debilitating fear or rage, the mind has to step in and agree with a faulty assessment.
It has to assent to the judgment.
Precisely. The mind has to judge something terrible is happening and I am threatened, and then assent to that judgment. It has to agree, yes, this is awful, I must panically attack. Seneca says fear involves flight, anger involves assault. Staying in control means catching that moment between the initial shock, propathia, and the assent that creates the full-blown passion, pathos.
So the training is about widening that gap, giving yourself space to withhold assent from irrational judgments.
Exactly. You acknowledge the physical jolt, the first movement, but you don't endorse the catastrophic interpretation that often follows. You maintain rational control.
And if you succeed in mastering these irrational passions, the pathy, what's left, is it just blankness?
No, not at all. This is the other side of the coin. The ultimate aim is apatheia, which doesn't mean apathy in the modern sense, but rather freedom from irrational passion.
Freedom from the negative stuff.
Right. And this freedom, this inner tranquility, actually clears the way for what they called the eupathei, the good feelings or rational emotions.
Eupathia. Okay, like what?
These are rational, healthy emotional states consistent with virtue and reason. They include things like rational joy as opposed to irrational exuberance based on externals, rational caution, a calculated assessment of risk, not blind fear, and rational well-wishing or goodwill towards others.
So things like cheerfulness, kindness, affection, those are okay.
Absolutely, provided they stem from a rational understanding of the world and our place in it, not from faulty judgments or attachments. The Stoic sage isn't emotionless. They are governed by reason and experience these positive, rational emotions.
And this brings us right back to the walk again, doesn't it?
Perfectly. That moderate, sustained walk provides the ideal time and mental space needed to practice this, to test and discriminate between all the mental impressions flooding in.
Catching the initial reactions,
Yeah.
examining the judgment.
And ensuring you accept none that haven't been thoroughly tested and scrutinized. Epictetus basically said this is the primary ongoing job of the philosopher constantly examining impressions.
And the physical act of walking helps how?
It keeps the body productively occupied, grounding you, preventing the million distractions of daily life from derailing this crucial internal work. It's like an immersion tank for applied psychology happening while you move through the world.
Okay, so we've covered the internal control, the judgments, the emotions. Let's shift now to how this training helps engage with the external world, especially with things like ambition, loss, and just plain bad luck.
Right. How do you deal with the inevitable difficulties and disappointments of life, even after all this training?
Yeah. And a key Stoic technique here is that famous, maybe slightly grim-sounding one, negative visualization.
Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils or misfortunes.
Tell us about that. What does it actually involve?
It's the practice of deliberately, consciously contemplating the potential loss of things you value while you still have them.
So, thinking about losing your job while you're still employed, thinking about a loved one dying while they're still alive.
Yes. Or contemplating the loss of your health, your possessions, your reputation.
That sounds really morbid. Doesn't it just make you anxious or depressed?
Yeah.
Isn't it counterintuitive to dwell on potential tragedies?
It sounds that way to us, perhaps, but that's a common misunderstanding of the goal. The Stoics weren't trying to make themselves miserable or invite disaster.
So what was the point?
Resilience. It's a psychological inoculation, a preparation against shock, against feeling entitled to good fortune, and against the kind of acute, overwhelming grief that comes from unexpected loss.
So by thinking about it beforehand, it hurts less if it actually happens.
That's part of it. Seneca argued that blows land less heavily when they are anticipated, but it's also about cultivating the right mindset towards the things we enjoy.
Which is?
To realize that our enjoyment of these external things, our health, our loved ones, our comforts, is, in a sense, a lucky accident. It's a temporary arrangement, not a permanent entitlement. It could end abruptly at any moment.
Wow, that's stark.
It is. But the aim is to learn to enjoy these things fully, appreciate them deeply, without clinging to them desperately or feeling we have some cosmic right to keep them forever.
It reframes enjoyment, not as ownership, but as a loan.
Exactly, Seneca's analogy. He explicitly says everything we have from fortune, health, wealth, family is merely on loan. And like any loan, it can be recalled, often without notice.
He was pretty blunt about loved ones too, wasn't he?
Extremely blunt. He said, "We are fools to wish for our loved ones to be immortal, because that's asking for something impossible outside the nature of things." He taught that grief hits people hard, not because loss itself is inherently terrible. Remember, externals aren't truly bad, but because they fail to anticipate the inevitable conditions of mortal life.
So anticipation aligns expectation with reality, reducing the emotional impact.
Correct. It prepares the mind. And this preparation isn't just for loss, but also for facing any kind of adversity.
How do they justify seeing adversity, things that genuinely seem unpleasant or difficult as something positive? How do you welcome hardship?
Well, starting from the premise that nothing external is truly bad in itself,
Yeah.
only our judgments make it so, then apparent adversity must be reframed. It can't be inherently evil.
So what is it then?
It's training. Seneca insisted it should be welcomed, almost like an athlete welcomes a tough workout or a worthy opponent.
He used that analogy of a wrestler.
Yes, famously. A wrestler doesn't benefit from facing weak, unskilled opponents. That makes him complacent, soft. He needs tough opponents, challenging matches, because that's what allows him to prove his skill, his strength, his virtue, and to develop it further.
So adversity is the resistance that builds our inner strength, our character.
Precisely. It reveals what we're made of and makes us tougher. The difficulty encountered on our philosophical walk, maybe a sudden downpour, a steep hill. Feeling tired isn't just an annoyance to be endured.
It's a practice opportunity.
It's a chance to practice acceptance, resilience, and maintaining focus on our internal state despite external discomfort. It's a microcosm of life's larger challenges.
And that attitude, that reframing, is key.
It's everything. Seneca even observed that everlasting misfortune does have one blessing, that it ends up by toughening those whom it constantly afflicts, which actually finds a really interesting modern parallel.
Oh, where's that?
In the work of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and founded logotherapy.
Ah, yes. Man's search for meaning.
Exactly. Frankl's experiences led him to conclude, much like the Stoics, that meaning, purpose, and even a kind of satisfaction could be found even in the most horrific and limiting conditions.
Oh.
He emphasized the power of attitude, the freedom of personal choice in how we respond to unavoidable suffering. The external circumstances were appalling, uncontrollable, but the prisoner's inner response, their choice of attitude towards their fate, that remained free.
The last human freedom, he called it.
The choice of one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, yes. He saw that those who lost faith in the future, who stopped exercising that inner choice, were often the first to decline. It powerfully echoes the Stoic emphasis on inner control despite external hardship.
That choice of attitude, that acceptance of limits, leads us nicely to another Stoic tool, the reserve clause.
Yes. Hupexeresis in Greek, sometimes called the proviso.
This is the idea that when you form an intention, like I will go to Rome or I will finish this project, you should mentally add fate permitting.
Exactly, or if nothing prevents me, or providence permitting, some kind of qualifier acknowledging external factors.
Now, on the surface, that sounds a bit like giving up, doesn't it? Like fatalism. Well, I'll try, but fate will decide anyway.
It can sound like that, but it's really the opposite of passive surrender. It's a very active exercise in realism and humility.
How so?
The Stoic concept of fate here isn't necessarily some capricious deity pulling strings. It's more like a catchy reminder, as one scholar puts it, of a fundamental truth.
Yeah.
We control far less than we think we do.
It represents the natural order. The chain of cause and effect.
Yes, causal determinism, the complex web of factors in the universe that are outside our individual volition. Adding the reserve clause is acknowledging that reality. It's saying, I will do everything in my power, everything that is up to me to achieve this goal, while recognizing that the final outcome also depends on external factors I don't control.
So you focus on the effort, not the result.
That is the absolute key. There's a famous analogy attributed to the Stoic antipater of the archer.
Okay, tell us that one.
The skilled archer does everything in their power to shoot well. They choose the right bow and arrow, they stand correctly, they draw the string smoothly, they aim carefully, they account for the wind as best they can, they release cleanly. Their goal is to perform the action of shooting perfectly. That is up to them.
The process.
The process, the effort, the application of skill, that's where their virtue lies. However, whether the arrow actually hits the bullseye depends on other things, too.
Like a sudden gust of wind.
Yeah.
Or the target falling over.
Exactly. External factors, fate permitting. So the wise archer ties their satisfaction and sense of success not to hitting the bullseye, the outcome, but to the excellence of their shot, the effort.
Because the effort is controllable, the result isn't, fully.
Precisely. If they tie their happiness to the result, they're vulnerable to disappointment every single time. If they tie it to doing their absolute best in the process, they achieve their goal every time they shoot, regardless of where the arrow lands. Their happiness is anchored in their prohairesis, their volition, their chosen actions.
So the reserve clause isn't about expecting failure. It's about defining success, correctly focusing on our own actions and intentions.
Yes. It prevents us from becoming arrogant in success, thinking it was all down to us, and devastated in failure, thinking we're worthless because the outcome wasn't achieved. It keeps our emotional equilibrium.
And all this internal training, controlling judgments, managing emotions, negative visualization, the reserve clause, it's not just for personal peace of mind, is it? The Stoics expected this to translate into action in the world.
Absolutely. This wasn't navel-gazing. All this preparation, often rehearsed during those walks, was meant to strengthen the will, to fulfill our duties, our roles in society, ethically and effectively.
Our roles, like what?
Whatever roles life assigns us or we choose, parent, child, citizen, friend, employee, leader. Stoicism demands that we strive to fulfill the obligations of these roles virtuously, using our reason and applying these principles, even when it's difficult or painful.
You mentioned Epictetus had a sharp example of this, about a father.
Yes, it's quite a striking story. He apparently encountered or heard about a father, a man of some standing, who had fled from his daughter's bedside when she was gravely ill.
He just left her. Why?
The father's excuse, apparently, was that he couldn't bear to watch her suffer. His love for her was so great, he claimed, that the sight was too painful.
And Epictetus' reaction?
Scathing criticism. Epictetus argued the man had fundamentally failed in his duty, his role as a father. He was claiming love as the reason for fleeing, but true, rational love and duty should have compelled him to stay, to provide comfort and support precisely because it was difficult.
So the father prioritized his own emotional comfort, avoiding the painful impression over his actual responsibilities.
Exactly. His flight showed a failure of his philosophical training. He hadn't sufficiently practiced dealing with difficult impressions and hadn't strengthened his will enough to act virtuously according to his role, even when faced with emotional pain. The walk, the reflection, the discipline, it's all meant to build the fortitude to stay when duty requires it.
Wow. Okay. So let's try to bring this all together then.
Yeah.
To summarize this deep dive, the philosophical walk, as practiced by the Stoics, isn't really about the physical benefits primarily.
Those are secondary, maybe even just incidental.
The real point is that it's this practical, sustained exercise in applying that core Stoic idea, the dichotomy of control.
Perfectly put. While you're walking, the path under your feet, the weather, your body's aches and pains, maybe even the destination, those are external, not fully up to you.
The judgments you make about the path, the focus you choose to maintain, the vigilance you exercise against irrational emotional reactions, and ultimately the character you are building through this practice.
That is all internal. That is where your freedom lies. That is what is truly up to you. The walk becomes a moving training ground for virtue.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to apply this today?
Well, I think it means shifting the goalposts. Seneca argued pretty strongly that the goal isn't just to live as long as possible. He said if we don't get our internal house in order, we could live for centuries and still just fritter away most of that time through anxiety, distraction, and faulty judgments.
Quality over quantity of years.
Definitely. He emphasized the one task, dedicating time each day to ourselves, to learning how to live well, how to use our reason effectively. The task is to organize every single day as if it might be our last.
Not in a morbid way, but
Not morbidly, but with focus and intention. Neither desperately longing for tomorrow nor fearing it, because we've done everything within our power today. We've maximized our internal effort, our virtuous action right now.
and the quiet rhythm, the moderate pace of a dedicated walk provides maybe the perfect, simplest stage for doing that work, for that daily maximization of internal effort.
It seems they certainly thought so. It carves out the time and space.
We learned that the whole point of this good walk is self-reflection, gaining wisdom, strengthening our will so we can actually meet our duties in the world, like that Father Epictetus criticized.
It's about becoming capable of doing what's right, regardless of discomfort.
Which leads us to the final question we want to leave you with. Think about your own daily movements. Maybe your commute in the car or on the train, maybe your run listening to music, maybe just pacing around the house.
Those moments when we are moving, but maybe not fully present.
Exactly. How often do those movements serve merely to distract us? To keep our minds busy with external stimuli, the urgent but maybe not important, instead of serving as moments to challenge ourselves, to genuinely scrutinize our thoughts and judgments, and to really consider if we're living up to the responsibilities, big and small, of our roles in the world.